There are moments in sports that stop you cold. Moments where everything you thought you knew gets flipped upside down in the span of a few hours, and you're left sitting there trying to process what you just witnessed. This was one of those moments. A young Filipino player named Alex walks into the Linz Open, barely on anyone's radar, steps onto the court against a local favorite playing in front of her own crowd, and does something that nobody in that stadium saw coming. But before we get to the result, let me paint you a picture of what this day actually looked like, because context matters here, and the full story is so much better than the headline. When Alex arrived at the tournament, there was no fanfare around her. No big entrance, no buzzing anticipation from the crowd. She was the newcomer, the unknown quantity, the player most people in that building hadn't spent much time thinking about. And that's not a knock on her, that's just the reality of being a young player stepping onto a big stage for the first time. You haven't had the chance to prove yourself yet. You're still just a name on a bracket to most people. Meanwhile, on the other side of the net, you had Julia, the hometown hero. The kind of player that an entire city shows up for. From the moment she walked into that venue, it was electric. The crowd knew her name, knew her game, had watched her grow. She wasn't just a tennis player to these people, she was their player. And when the match was about to begin, you could feel the weight of that. The stadium buzzing, flags waving, chants rolling through the stands. This was Julia's moment, Julia's crowd, Julia's court. And somewhere in the middle of all of that, there was Alex. Quiet, focused, not rattled by any of it. And that right there should have been the first warning sign for everyone watching, because a player who walks into that environment and doesn't flinch, that's not normal. That takes something special. The first few points of any big match tell you a lot, not just about technique, but about mentality. And from the very first exchange, something felt off about the script. Alex's serve landed clean, controlled, with a sharpness that doesn't come from someone who's nervous. Her movement was light and deliberate, not the kind of movement you see from someone who's overwhelmed. She looked, honestly, like she belonged there. Like she had played in front of hostile crowds 100 times before. Point by point, she held her ground. Every time Julia tried to assert herself, Alex was right there matching her, pushing back, refusing to give an inch. The crowd kept cheering, kept trying to lift Julia, kept waiting for that moment where the experience and home advantage would kick in and pull the match in the direction everyone expected. But that moment kept not arriving. And the longer it didn't arrive, the more you could sense the shift happening in that stadium. The energy started to change. The confident cheering started to carry just a hint of uncertainty underneath it. Because what was unfolding wasn't what anyone had prepared themselves for. Alex wasn't surviving the match. She was competing in it, genuinely, fearlessly competing in it. There's a particular type of pressure that comes with being the underdog on someone else's court. It's not just the opponent you're dealing with. It's the noise, the atmosphere, the constant reminder that the crowd is not with you, that every mistake you make will be met with celebration, and every point you earn will be received in near silence. For most players, especially young ones early in their careers, that environment can be suffocating. It can tighten your game, slow your thinking, make you hesitant at exactly the moments when you need to be decisive. Alex seemed to understand this, and more importantly, seemed to have made peace with it before she ever stepped on the court. She didn't try to feed off the crowd because that option wasn't available to her. Instead, she fed off something internal, something quieter and more sustainable. A belief in her own preparation, her own ability, her own game plan. And that mental foundation showed up in the way she played every single rally. She wasn't rushing. She wasn't gambling on low percentage shots trying to end points quickly and escape the pressure. She was patient, she was systematic, she was reading the match like someone who had done their homework and trusted what they'd found. Her footwork was a big part of this. Watch any elite player up close and you'll notice that their feet are almost always doing the real work before their arm ever swings. Alex's positioning was consistently excellent. She was always in the right place, always balanced, always arriving at the ball with time to spare rather than scrambling last minute. That kind of technical discipline doesn't happen by accident. It's the result of countless hours of drilling the same movements until they become instinct. And under pressure, instinct is everything. As the first set progressed, the match started to take on a different character. What had looked on paper like a straightforward win for the hometown favorite was turning into something much more complicated. The rallies were getting longer, more physical, more mentally taxing. Julia was still fighting, still playing her game, but she was having to work harder for every single point. And when you're expected to win comfortably and instead you find yourself grinding through every rally, that starts to get into your head whether you want it to or not. There's a psychological weight that comes with expectation. When you're the favorite, every point you drop feels like a step backward. Every time your opponent makes a great shot, it registers differently than it would if the roles were reversed. The crowd's anxiety becomes your anxiety. The commentator's surprise becomes your burden. And Julia was carrying all of that while Alex was carrying none of it. Alex had nothing to lose and everything to gain, and she played with exactly that kind of freedom. Not reckless freedom, but liberated freedom. The freedom of someone who had already exceeded expectations just by being competitive, and was now playing purely for the love of the battle. Then came the turning point, and when it came, it was decisive. There was a moment mid-match where Alex made a very deliberate choice. She stopped playing conservative tennis. She stopped managing the match and started attacking it. She moved inside the baseline, started taking the ball earlier, started hitting with more pace and more depth. She was no longer waiting for opportunities to open up. She was forcing them open. The effect on Julia was immediate and visible. Suddenly, she was being pushed further back behind the baseline, given less time to set up her shots, forced to play defensively when she had been expecting to dictate. And when a player who's used to controlling a match suddenly finds themselves being controlled, the adjustment is not easy. You can see it in the way they move, the way they hold their racket between points, the way their eyes scan the court looking for something familiar to hold onto. Julia tried to respond. Credit to her, she didn't give up and she kept competing. But every time she tried to reassert herself, Alex had an answer. A sharper return, a better positioned shot, a more clinical finish on a rally that should have gone the other way. The momentum had shifted completely, and both players knew it. The crowd knew it too. That earlier noise, that confident celebratory energy, had been replaced by something tenser. People were still watching, still invested, but now they were worried. Now they were hoping rather than expecting. And that difference is enormous. Hope is fragile. Expectation carries confidence. When a crowd shifts from one to the other, you feel it everywhere in the stadium. As the match moved toward its final stretch, the intensity reached a level that was almost uncomfortable to watch because it felt so fragile. One swing in either direction could have changed everything. Julia was still capable of turning it around. She had the experience, the crowd, the motivation. And Alex, for all her composure, was still a young player in only her debut, carrying the weight of that incredible run she had put together. Moments like these are when you find out what a player is actually made of. Not when things are going smoothly, not when the game plan is working perfectly, but when it's tight and uncomfortable and the pressure is coming from every direction at once. And what Alex showed in those final moments was remarkable. She stayed in her process. She didn't try to do too much. She didn't panic when Julia made good shots. She didn't tighten up when the crowd got loud. She just kept playing her game, point by point, trusting the work she had put in to be enough. Her serve in those closing games was especially impressive. Clean, well-placed, backing up everything she had done throughout the match with a controlled aggression that spoke to genuine confidence rather than desperation. And when the rallies happened, she was right there, sharp and present, never letting Julia get comfortable, never giving her the rhythm she needed to build momentum. The final points played out like something scripted for a film, except this was real and the stakes were completely genuine. Long rallies that pushed both players to the edge of what they could sustain. Moments where it genuinely could have gone either way. And then, finally, the shot that ended it all. A clean, decisive finish under pressure that sealed one of the most extraordinary debut victories you'll see on a professional tennis court. The reaction in the stadium was fascinating. There was shock, obviously. The kind of stunned silence that falls over a crowd when the result they never prepared for actually materializes right in front of them. But underneath the shock, there was something else. Respect. Because those fans had watched the whole match. They had seen Alex earn every single point. They had watched her compete with a maturity and fearlessness that nobody had seen coming. And even if the result wasn't what they wanted, they couldn't deny what they had witnessed. A young player from the Philippines had walked into their building, faced their favorite, and left with the victory. And she had done it the right way, through grit, intelligence, and an absolute refusal to be intimidated. For Alex personally, this moment means everything. Not just as a result on a scorecard, but as proof. Proof that the work is translating. Proof that the belief she carried into that stadium was justified. Proof that she can do this at this level against real opponents in real pressure situations. There's something incredibly powerful about having that proof in your back pocket, because every hard moment going forward, every match where things aren't going well and doubt starts creeping in, she can come back to this. She can remember that she walked into the Linz Open as an unknown and walked out having beaten the local favorite on debut. That memory doesn't fade. It becomes fuel. And then there's the bigger picture, the thing that stretches beyond just Alex and her career. Because this win carries a weight that goes beyond a single result in a single tournament. For Filipino tennis, for young players in the Philippines who are watching and dreaming about what's possible, this moment plants a seed. It says the global stage is not out of reach. It says that a player from the Philippines can go to these tournaments and compete, not just participate, but genuinely compete and win. That representation matters more than people sometimes realize. Young athletes need to see people who look like them succeeding at the highest levels, because it expands what they believe is possible for themselves. And today, Alex gave an entire generation of Filipino tennis players something to believe in. But let's not get too far ahead of ourselves either, because the work isn't done, and Alex herself would be the first to tell you that. One tournament win, as brilliant as it was, doesn't define a career. What defines a career is what you do next. How you handle the attention that comes after a breakthrough. How you manage the expectations that suddenly appear where there were none before. How you keep improving and staying hungry when people are now watching your every move. These are the challenges that come with success, and they're real challenges, ones that have derailed plenty of talented players who had their breakout moment but couldn't sustain it. What makes Alex's case feel different is the way she carries herself. There's a groundedness to her that you don't always see in young players who've just had their first big moment. She competed without arrogance, won without theatrics, and handled the pressure without drama. Those are the qualities of someone who understands that this is a marathon, not a sprint. Someone who knows that the debut was just the opening chapter and that the real work of building a career is still ahead. The opponents she'll face going forward will be better prepared for her. They'll have watched this match and done their homework. The element of surprise that served her so well today won't be available every time. She'll have to keep evolving, keep adding layers to her game, keep finding new ways to solve problems on the court. And that's actually exciting, because it means we get to watch that development happen in real time. We get to see how she handles those bigger challenges and tougher opponents. We get to see whether the qualities she showed today are truly who she is, or whether they were just a brilliant flash of potential. And based on what we saw, the smart money says this is genuinely who she is. The composure she showed throughout that match, the tactical intelligence, the mental fortitude in the moments that mattered most, those aren't things you fake. Those are things you build over years of serious work and serious belief. And Alex has clearly been doing both. So here we are at the end of this story, except it's not really the end at all. It's the beginning. It's the moment everything changes for a young player who showed the world what she's capable of on the biggest stage of her young career. The Linz Open will be remembered as the tournament where Alex arrived, not quietly, not tentatively, but with a full-stop, undeniable statement that demanded attention. The rest of the tennis world is now paying it. And as her journey continues, as the tournaments get bigger and the opponents get tougher and the pressure mounts in ways that are hard to even imagine right now, one thing feels certain. Alex is going to be just fine. Because she's already proven she has everything it takes to belong, and she's only just getting started.